So welcome to the podcast. This is a weekly podcast where we speak to a number of people that I refer to as undercover celebrities. They're people who've got some sort of celebrity following, some sort of celebrity currency, whether they be a sports person or an artist, or they might be a social media personality, but they haven't quite cracked it into like mega celebrity status. But I can get a sense that that's the direction they're headed. So today we have a very special guest. He was a favourite rugby league player of mine. He played for my favourite team, the Manly Sea Eagles. He also played for the Parramatta Eels, and he was a very good player, very reliable guy, was in a very successful team there at Manly. He's gone on now to begin to establish himself in the sports media field, and he's building up a large following there. I get a sense that the hard work and the lessons he's learnt playing rugby league, he's going to be able to apply those to the next career that he chooses to master. He's an all-round great guy, pretty good golf player, and welcome to the show, Justin Horo.
Thanks very much for that, Pete. Appreciate the kind words.
Yeah, no worries, Justin. Great to have you on the show. Like I said in the intro there, I've always been a big Manly fan. I used to love watching you run off Foz. So it's been really great getting to know you personally after, watching you on the field. So, we'll talk about a bit of those Manly days and some of the other footy days, you've had. But what I'd like to do first is just like step it back a bit. And you can go back as far as you want. You can go back to childhood days. You can go back to high school. You played in probably the hottest high school team that I've ever heard of in terms of footy talent. But why don't you take us back a bit to where your journey started from, and we'll move that through to today. So, why don't you take it away with where things started for you?
I've had a pretty unique and journey within the rugby league community. So I was born in Auckland, New Zealand, but my dad played rugby league as well. So he, after a couple of years of living in New Zealand, he got the opportunity to travel overseas and play Super League in the UK, which I was able to do, which was pretty cool. And then he moved us over to Parramatta when I was 3 years old. From that point, I grew up in Western Sydney, around the Penrith, in between the Penrith and Parramatta area. Footy has always been in my life. It's always been a big part of my life. I played it since I was 6 years old. Went to all of Dad's games growing up. Always been embroiled in the culture. From that point on, I didn't really take it too seriously though until I got to about 15, 16. It was more, I sort of felt like, when I was younger with footy in particular, that I sort of just did it because Dad did it. Like I liked the idea of being able to do something Dad did.
Yeah.
It's you touch on some of the teams that I played for. In particular, I was lucky enough to play in a real good school system at Westfield Sports High School.
Yeah.
A few of us from that team, lucky in the Opens team in particular, have gone on to play first grade footy, which is pretty rare. That there's probably maybe 6 or 7 of us, maybe even more from that team that have played consistent NRL first grade. And from that school footy, I got the opportunity. I got picked up to go to the Sydney Roosters SG Ball, which is the under-18s.
Yeah.
Spent my junior career out there. So 18s, 19s and 20s at the Roosters. By the back end of that, it probably didn't go as well as I was hoping. And then sort of had a little bit of an in-between year, knuckled down the following year, and then was able to make my debut the year after that at Parramatta. So from that point, I had a couple of good years early on at Parramatta, and then went on to have some really good and more successful years at Manly, and we ended up also playing overseas as well in the Super League.
Yeah.
Firstly at Catalan Dragons and at Wakefield Trinity, the Cats. But that's basically it. Like that's a quick brief about how it all started. But if is there anything in particular you want to touch on?
Yeah, there's a couple of things in there that kind of piqued my attention that I wouldn't mind chatting to you a little bit more. So to start with, I just remember you. Your dad was Mark Horo. That's right, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, my understanding, because he played for Para, didn't he?
Yep.
Yeah, and my understanding,
his first year was 1990.
Yeah, my recollection too is in some respects he was actually a little bit before his time, because if I remember correctly, he actually was he a wrestler as well, or he had good wrestling
Yeah,
technique?
yeah, he was. Yeah, so he come from a wrestling background in New
Yeah,
Zealand. I think he even went overseas to the States when he was younger. At an early age of 13 to 15 or whatever. So that, like you said, before his time,
yeah.
was a really good defender, really good tackler, a bit of a workhorse, and that's how he made his mark in the NRL.
Yeah, no, my memory of him playing is he was actually, I guess, in today's terms, like I mean, even positions in footy have changed so much, but in today's terms, he'd be like your classic middle forward. He was very good in tight. He was,
Yeah,
and like I mean, in those days, it was kind of the tail end of when scrummaging was actually a thing as well. So. I mean, he was putting the wrestling to good effect in scrummaging as well. And then, I can remember watching him defend at times, and he had, in some ways, at that time, what was an unusual defensive, very effective, but unusual defensive technique, which has now come on to be like the mainstream of how people are defending.
yeah, for sure. And I don't think everyone's a big fan of it. Like people,
No,
Melbourne have really done really well at that sort of system. He, like you said, he was a little bit before his time. And,
yeah,
and he was a lot different to me in terms of players. He loved in there and getting in there and doing all the tough stuff. And he was a gritty defender where I preferred it out on the edges where it was a little bit softer. And
yeah,
I was more attack based. I always felt like that was my strength, getting out wide and running some lines. So
yeah, yeah,
very different players, but
yeah.
I feel like we had a similar mindset towards the game. We both were not the most talented players, I don't think, but I feel like we both had a crack, and I felt like I got that from him.
Okay, is that? And do you think that's when you say had a crack? Was it because I mean he was a like it's hard to actually describe it correctly because he was an aggressive player, but not in no way a dirty player. Like he was just a
No,
very strong, kind of powerful forward. And do you think when you say having a crack, is it like there's a little bit of fearlessness in that as well? Like he wasn't a particularly big guy, but I remember him never backing down from anyone as well. Do you think that
yeah.
when you say having a crack, is that what you're talking about?
I think having a crack as in just like just reliable and just working his ass off.
Yeah.
That's the one thing I remember from Daddy. He prided himself on tackling the top in the tackle count for
Yeah.
his clubs a lot of the years. I think he even got there in total tackles at the NRL in a couple of years. I think he might have been in the top 10 a couple of times. So I just feel like when I say that, it's just, pretty much giving it his all. From a lot of the old teammates, that I've dealt with over the years, I enjoyed playing with him for that. He was happy to get in there and do the dirty stuff for the team
Yeah.
if it meant that they were going to win. So I think that was definitely one of his better traits.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like you touched on, like the Melbourne Storm and how they've perfected the defensive game, but it's interesting. What I'm hearing between you and your dad is, in a way, it's similar to probably the greatest quality at the Melbourne Storm, and that, as I see it, the greatest quality at the Melbourne Storm is the difference between their worst game and their best game is not very much.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, they're producing at the same level all the time. And if I remember your dad, there wasn't much difference between his best game and his worst game. He had a standard that he produced at. And I would say you're the same. Like you had a standard.
I think I had a bigger gap. I had a little my gap between my worst and best was a little bit because I feel like with his job, and it's because he, like I said, because he'd be in the middle, he's always amongst it. He had to make his carries. He had to make his tackles. Whereas I was a little bit different. Sometimes I was reliant a little bit too on, sometimes the game might get away from you if you're just stuck on an edge.
Yeah.
For instance, even if it was no fault of my own there, where the other team in particular a lot of the time preferred attacking to the right side of the defensive line, and I was always on the left because that was the easiest way to pass. A lot of players' best pass is from right to left.
Yeah.
That's the more natural throwing. So there was parts of me that enjoyed being on the left because I got more of a break than the right edge. But sometimes I often felt like games, even when we played really well as a team, that my involvement level wasn't up to sometimes I feel like the game got away from me, even though we might have particularly played well or whatever, or I felt like sometimes I couldn't get into games as well. But yeah. I think that's the main difference between us.
I hear what you're saying on that level, but I think the similarity was that like the commitment to your game and the level of execution didn't vary much.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I think that was the same with your dad. And that's what I'd say with Melbourne too. Like Melbourne still make errors, things still don't always go their way, but their ability to keep showing up and delivering. And I think like yourself, that's something very common between my memory of your dad and yourself as well, that it was your level of execution, your level of commitment never varied too much.
Yeah, I appreciate that. That's it's pretty good. A lot of players would probably appreciate those sorts of words. And like you said with Melbourne, yeah, they do make errors, but they don't really make any unforced errors. They don't really put themselves under the pump in the sense of, yeah, they don't really make, like you said, they don't really make any dumb plays. So
no,
if they make an error, they're willing to back it up if it's not an unforced error.
Yeah, and they're kind of more prepared to do the hard work to produce an opportunity than to like throw caution to the wind and hope that something might work out. So
yeah,
it's
totally agree.
Yeah, their opportunities come on the back of the hard work and foundation they're built. And like I say, I think yourself and your father, that would be a reasonable way to describe you guys as well. And something.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Yeah. So just on that then, I'm interested then in the period between, because you mentioned there playing juniors at the Roosters. So
yep.
I'm interested in what happened. You said things fell off a bit there. What happened at that? Because you're, like I say, you're in a very hot schoolboy side. It was, if you look back, it's a star-studded side. You've gone into the Roosters juniors. You're kind of on the way up there, and you alluded to that things sort of fell off. What happened at that point?
Yeah, I think I just got, now that I look back on it, I definitely got a bit carried away. I think because I hadn't really had a taste of any representative footy up until that point. I never really got picked in any rep teams, and then I had a really good year in the under-17s, just locally and at school footy. I started to really get my confidence with the game, and then I ended up going out from a kid that spent most of his life out in Western Sydney. There's not much doing out there, and then you move into the eastern suburbs, and there's plenty of distractions in the eastern suburbs. There's a lot going on.
Yeah.
There's always a party for you. There's pretty girls out there.
Yeah.
And I just got caught up in it a little bit. So I know 100% that I put my lifestyle away from footy in front of footy, and I feel like for sure that's what cost me, because it wasn't until just like a bit of a reality check the following year where I went from being on fairly good money for a 19-year-old kid.
Yeah,
a lot of, especially in the under-20 system. I know, I had mates that had played a lot of rep footy, and they went on the money that I was on in the 19s and 20s, and then just not one contract after that season. Yeah, so that was a reality check. That was a gut check. I feel like it was the perfect thing that happened to me at that time, though. It was very humbling. It got me refocused again. I went and trained. My dad, I purely got a gig through my dad being involved in Parramatta Club still.
Yeah.
Because they offered me just like a part-time contract, so nothing. I got no money guaranteed, but what I was going to get match payments. I think it was just like 100 a loss, 300 a draw, and 500 a win.
Yeah. Just
playing reserve grade footy. And then but I was training with the under 20s throughout the week. And then when the first graders would get dropped back to reserve grade, we'd all link up together for captain's run. And then captain's run is the training session before, and then play on the weekend. So I didn't feel the greatest throughout the week when I was training with the kids. Like, being a year or two older, there was only about 4 or 5 of us that trained with the under 20s kids. And then at the end of the week, it was pretty cool when we got the boys to come back. But I remember like thinking throughout the year, because I started to play good footy again, that I'll never let this happen again. I won't put myself in a position where, I'm training with kids again. I want to be training with the men. I want to be training with the first grade. I want to get back to where I was playing before that last year of the Roosters in particular.
Yeah.
And like I said, I think that really set me up well for the following year. Secured a proper contract, NRL contract, the year after, and then the year following that, I made my debut. So everything started to trend up after that initial gut check.
Yeah. So with that, and it's interesting too, is that I've been like following or researching a few sportsmen around the world, and there's kind of like LeBron and Michael Jordan and these guys, and those guys have always responded best to somebody putting them down. So if they get like Michael Jordan, and in fact, Michael Jordan talks about if somebody wasn't putting him down, he would look at something and imagine they were putting him down so that then he'd be inspired to go out and prove them wrong. And then I've heard of other athletes who they actually do best when they're getting encouragement. So like they're coming around the final turn of the marathon and the crowd starts going wild and that lifts them up. Which of those, or is it somewhere in the middle for you that kind of, because it sounded like you had that little reality check there, and then you like had to probably have a look at yourself in the mirror and say, hey, if I'm going to make anything of this, I'm going to have, it's up to me to make it. So is it that kind of having the cheer squad, or is it having the hard times that motivate you, or is it a bit of both?
Yeah, it's probably right. You're probably right. It's in the middle. I've had all three, to be fair. I've had people that have patted me on the back way too much, and I didn't respond to that at all.
Yeah.
I end up going the other way, like I said. I've had people that have been really harsh and critical, and to the point where it's like you can tell that they've got no faith in you, and that's another way that I've pushed back. But if I've had a coach that's been firm and feel like gave me good constructive criticism, where I know nothing's guaranteed, but if I put in the work and they give me the information and I come up with the goods and they'll reward me. Those always been the guys that I've responded well to. Yeah. One guy in particular that's was a big part of that for me when I went through a crossroads in my NRL career as well. It was a little bit different. I lost a bit of confidence in first grade, whereas the other reason in 20s was my lifestyle. I think when I was at Parramatta and I ended up getting dropped in the start of the 2012 season, I just completely lost all my confidence. They brought in a few other players, and I didn't really know where my place was at the club. But a guy that was really big with me was a guy, Brad Arthur, the current coach of Parramatta. Okay. And he took over. He was interim coach at the back end of 2012. He ended up getting me to Manly the following year when I hadn't secured a contract as well. And it's not because, Brad was just giving it to me. He actually got me halfway through the year, and we started doing some video together. We started breaking down my game. And this is from reserve grade games, which is pretty rare. Not many coaches take the time to sit down with the reserve grade players, so I really appreciated that. And we just went over my game, and then once he took over, he said, look, it took me about 4 weeks. He goes, you've got a clean slate now. You go back to reserve grade because in a way, I was moping around down in reserve grade again. Yeah. He goes, if you do the right things, put in the effort, keep coming in and doing my video with you, and I'm seeing improvements, I'll give you another shot if it becomes available. Nothing was guaranteed. So once I had that refocus, and I realised that I was a chance again, because a lot of it comes down to, not only what you can put out there, but if someone believes in you as well. So you half need that. Yeah. And I felt like he had that for me. Then he moved on to Manly and then took me over there, and then I had the same conversations with him and Jeff Tooby. When I come over, there was nothing guaranteed. They just lost Tony Williams. Jimmy Buehrer was supposed to be on the left and Glenn Stewart on the right. But I was lucky. Once I got to that situation, Glenn Stewart had a knee surgery the year before. So Jimmy Buehrer found himself on the right, and I got an opportunity to come straight into the team, the starting 13. And from that on, I just I realised this is going to be my shot. I'm in a really good team here. It was the opposite to what was happening at Para. I was a new guy coming in with full of energy and a new lease on life. So, hopefully I did my best during that period, maintained my spot, and had some really successful years there at Manly.
Yeah. I'm just going to step you back a bit, because there's something I heard you say, and I'm interested just to hear, because I've never really heard you speak about this, and that is your actual debut. Like, what was it like at Para? Because you'd obviously spent a bit of time in the Parramatta area, and then, playing lower grades for Parramatta, to actually get the call up. Can you talk us through what that experience was like?
Yeah, that for me, it was as good a call up as you can get, in terms of, I didn't know until 3:00 in the afternoon on the day. So I'd been 18th man the year before a couple of times, and then It was round 3 of the 2010 season, and no one had gave me the indication that I was going to play, but I was in the 18 and 19 most weeks. So
Yeah.
I was training with the first grade team, and then I'd go back. What happened was Daniel Mortimer ended up getting sick, who was our 5'8", so they moved Fletty Mateo into the 6 jersey, and then I got my opportunity on the bench. But I think a lot of people knew within the club. I think Fletty and obviously Daniel Mortimer had told Daniel Anderson that he was feeling a bit crook. So I got the call at 3 o'clock. I was purely going to the game just to be 18th man, hold the pads and all that sort of stuff. And then I get the call that I'm on. So quickly called the parents. They were all pumped. They come to the game, and I got I only got 10 minutes at the end of the game. But it's once you play that first game, it's like a weight's being lifted off your shoulders, and very grateful to get that opportunity. And
I mean, you only obviously had a short time to experience, like from when you were told to when you played, but what was the sort of like the emotion? Was there fear, excitement, a bit of everything?
Yeah, like I said, I didn't really get a chance to soak it in too much. I think it was all because it was pretty much because I was on, like I said, so it worked out really well where they just go, I'm on, I made the calls. By the time I got my head around it, I'm sitting in, I could just remember sitting in before the game going, oh, fuck, well, this is like I'm about to do this. So, it was, I appreciated that to being able, because I feel like if I'd been told at the start of the week, there would have been so much nervous energy. But because I got the call so late, it all happened so quick, and it was a bit of a blur, to be fair.
Yeah. No, it sounds like what I'm hearing that's really helped you along your journey has been having some really astute coaches. So, like, I mean, by the sound of it there, Daniel Anderson pulled the right rein there. By like he could have told you midweek, and you could have had 3 or 4 days to freak out about it. But it sounds like he pulled the right rein by going, hey, your time's come, get ready, go. So that sounds like that was a great decision. And then you said earlier, like with Brad Arthur, that just him taking you aside and not neither cheering or like hitting you with a stick, but just saying, hey, Justin, this is the reality of the situation. If you address this, and this, you're going to improve your chances going forward. So it sounds like those more, like rational, logical guys had a great effect on you.
Yeah, for sure. Like Daniel Anderson was, he was quite a funny character, but he was a really smart NRL coach. Like you said, he tried to take the pressure off me a little bit, obviously, with that situation. I think sometimes unfairly he took too much of the brunt, because I got a lot of respect for him. And then it's same with Brad. We had Brad at Manly for 1 year, and that was in 2013 when we lost the game to the Roosters in the grand final. And you speak to a lot of boys from that year that ended up eventually coming in the decision of a few players eventually moving on because of the amount of respect that they had for him and what he was able to produce for them. Because he was exactly the same way with me as he was with our captain Jamie Lyon, as he was with some of the young kids at the time coming through, Petty Hickman, who has become like quite a big name now. But he treated everyone. Everyone was on the same playing field, and everyone thought they had an opportunity to improve and get a spot on the team. And I think that created a really good environment in the team.
Yeah, no, I remember actually when you signed with Manly, because I remember Gifty was injured, but it's kind of like you really fell on your feet when you got to Manly, though, didn't you? Do you think that was like a result of, it was a very winning culture at Manly there, and it's probably, a lot of people say that Manly era there was the last real team of footy players. So do you think it was the culture that existed there, or do you think it was that you saw for yourself, hey, like the doors are opening here, I could really, further my career a lot quicker here? Or do you think it was a combination of both? Like, what do you think? Because I would say, and this is just my opinion, looking at your time at Para and looking at your time at Manly, is your time at Para, it had some high points and some low points and some up and downs and a bit of inconsistency. But when you got to Manly, it's kind of just seemed to go from strength to strength to strength over a number of seasons. And I'm just interested in what was the change in your mindset and whether you agree with what I say there.
Yeah, it's. I think you're right. For me, it was definitely the culture, and I think it was with regards to the culture at Parramatta. In terms of, I felt like I put in the same amount of effort at both clubs.
Yeah.
It's just the nature of the quality of the squad we had. You know, when I was at Parramatta, we were really up and down because we had a lot of young kids. We had a fairly there was an age difference. We had some older players, but a lot of the kids were being blooded and coming through and up having really good careers after it. But at the time, was still very raw. And then when I got to Manly, there was just like a lot of senior players. The culture that the senior boys had instilled, I just didn't want to let them down. I knew that there was an opportunity on the left edge there. It was probably only one of the few missing pieces in a pretty set lineup. So I knew I had the opportunity to come there, and if I'd done the right things, even with regards to buying into the culture and respecting the older fellas and making sure that I'm showing that I'm working, then I felt like I had a good chance to be playing consistently, and that's the way it turned out.
Yeah, and then obviously some super successful years there at Manly. It was probably, there's been some great eras in that, like in the Manly club, which I followed for a long time myself. But that was a super successful era, like a core group of players that came through together, and then it seemed to be everybody who came in, people like yourself, just added a little bit extra to what was already there as well.
Yeah, that's it, mate. You just had to buy into the culture. And if you did that, and you earn the respect of the older boys, then the team was going to look after itself.
Yeah. So when you finished up at Manly, then you went to the Super League. What was that experience like?
Yeah, I really enjoyed that. I grew up a lot over there. Once I went to once I went overseas, it was just what's the word? What would it be like? It was an eye opener for me. I got thrown into moving to a country that's their first language isn't English. I moved to France originally, so I had to learn a new language as well as learning the culture, and then just sort of meeting new people, getting out of my comfort zone.
Yeah.
Footy was still pretty cool. We started pretty well over there and then faded a little bit, but I love that experience all up. I made so many. My favourite part about playing overseas was the people that I met and the relationships that I built. I've got some really close friends now that I could call on if I decided to head overseas and go to Europe. So I cherish those relationships in particular from my time over there.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. So let's kind of move it forward to now when you came back after your stint in the Super League. How was that? Because when you first landed back, you were kind of like in the realization that footy had pretty much at the level that you've played at had ended. What was your thought pattern going through that transition of the end of your footy career?
I was originally looking at getting involved in player management. It's something that I thought that there was a gap in that market for it to be done just a little bit. But I thought there were some improvements that could have been made in that department. Of not really with my own situation. I had a pretty good run with my management company, but there are so many different ones, and I felt like there were a few managers out there that could have been doing better. So I always envisioned myself doing that, and then I went in to go speak to one of my mates, a guy that I'd known for a while, Isaac John, who was doing some good things at YKTR, who you know about.
Yeah.
And I did a podcast with him, and he just started up YKTR Sports. So they invested some of the money that they'd done really well with from the clothing company, started their own YKTR Sports. We did a podcast. He asked me if I wanted to get involved. I was a little bit apprehensive at first. I didn't think people would want to listen to me. I hadn't done much media stuff before, so I didn't really know how it was going to go. But I thought, you know what, I'll just have a crack. And that was pretty much the first 3 or 4 weeks since I got back, and I've been doing it ever since. So look, we've been going on maybe about 15 or 16 months. I've been doing it for now.
Yeah.
Really starting to see some improvements in it. Really consistent with my content and a bit of a following that we're starting to get now. So really grateful for that opportunity, and I really like the way that's flowing at the moment.
Yeah. So with it, let's just with your podcast there, what's the main themes in your podcast?
It's a sports related podcast, so I enjoy watching all sports. So that's the part that sort of attracted Ice to me. He knew that I loved, in particular, I love me American sports, NFL, NBA, but also, being over in the UK and being a fan of the Premier League and football, golf, a bit of everything, mate. So
Yeah.
if I can get someone on and chew the fat with them about sports, the idea of it was to get players on, more rugby league players, and talk less about rugby league and more about their interest away from footy in other sports. And we've done that, and we're growing. We're growing now. We're starting to branch out and cover more stuff. So it's been a pretty exciting 15 months, and just looking forward to this year in particular, 2021. We want to make it a big one.
Yeah, and I've noticed, like I've seen around your podcast, some of the chat that goes on, and that you're actually starting to create a tribe, like this, like a true tribe of people that are genuinely, following and promoting and expanding your podcast. Where, like, let's project it forward a few years, let's say 5 years forward. Where do you see yourself? Do you still, like, is it the podcast growing and like leveraging that out into other media opportunities or into other business opportunities? Have you got an idea of where is next for you?
Yeah, well, look, even in shorter term. So me and Isaac sat down this year, and at the moment, the way I've been getting compensated for what I've been doing is through merchandise sales and sponsorship.
Yeah.
They obviously take a percentage of the clip, and then they'll give me a little kick on. Yeah. But by the end of the year, for me, my goal is that I'm, creating and putting out enough good content where I'm on a full-time salary with the boys, and in order to do that, we've got to be creating good content. So that's what I want to happen in the next 12 months. On the back of that, leveraging and potentially doing other things. But for me, I'm really excited about growing the brand of YKTR Sports. It's because I sort of come into this with mates. Like three of my mates have done really well with YKTR, and if we can make YKTR Sports as big as what they've done with YKTR, then that'll be it'll feel like very like a pretty cool accomplishment.
Great achievement. A great achievement.
Great achievement.
Yeah. So then, to build YKTR Sports out, what do you need there? Like, are you looking for more? Do you want more guests or higher profile guests, or what do you think is going to be the thing that's going to build that out to where you want it to go?
It's just consistency for us, mate. With the last year in particular was more, we'll just see how this goes. Now we've got, like you said, we've got a bit of a tribe, we've got a bit of following. They're expecting us to make sure we're putting out content and keeping up to date with all that stuff. So that's the biggest thing. And I think if we do that, people are starting to take notice. We're starting to get clippings all the time from interviews that we do in some of the other bigger networks, and therefore bringing on more sponsors. And then, like I said, in 12 months, hopefully we're big enough where, we're doing our own footy companion show. So hopefully in that 12 months, we've built it up to it, that it's pretty self-sustainable.
Yeah, it's funny. Like, I'm just thinking about it. Like, the thoughts going through my head is that your future path is in some way going to be a collection of the path you've been on. Like we spoke about, the similarity with your dad and yourself and the Melbourne Storm, producing a quality with the best and the worst not being too far apart in terms of commitment and effort and efficiency. So, like, I'm hearing you say that in the content with YKTR, you've got to be producing at a certain level and with consistency. And then, like, in your footy career, that opportunity opened up on the left edge there at Manly, and there's an opportunity opened up here now with YKTR. It's almost like, in a funny sort of way, the lessons you've got in footy, you're going to be able to use, that's going to take you to where you want to go in this next stage of your life.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I haven't even thought about it like that before, but there are so many life lessons that you can take out from, playing footy. I think, some guys come out of it and they get a bit stuck because they well, fuck, what am I going to do now? I haven't, all I know is rugby league. But some of the traits of, working in teams and putting the company or the team before yourself, realizing that, if I do well, YKTR Sports is going to do well, and therefore they'll look after me. Like, that's the mentality I've got with it all. Yeah. So I suppose that's exactly what I talked about with the selflessness of my old boy. If he played well and did his tackles and made his carries, then that put Parramatta in a better opportunity to win more games, and that's the same sort of mentality I'm taking with it for sure.
Yeah, and it's so like, I mean, I've read a couple of times that the number one rule for success is just showing up, and it kind of like that further reminds me of like you on that Manly left edge. It was just run the line, run the line, run the line. Now it doesn't mean you're going to get through and score every time, but if you keep running the line all the time, the opportunity will eventually come to you.
Yeah, for sure, and even if it doesn't come for me, someone else might get an opportunity with a decoy out the back, and we can still score. So it's exactly right, mate.
Yeah. All right. Well, look, thanks for being on the show. It's been great chatting to you. Like, I've enjoyed our friendship, and it's been great learning a few extra things about you there. Now, if people wanted to get in touch with you or connect up with your podcast, what's the best way for them to do that?
So my Instagram handle is the scope _the scope. It's that's based off the nickname that I had through at the later end of my footy career. And then if they want to get in touch with me for anything with regards to sponsorship of the podcast or get in touch with the company, it's justin@yktr.com.au. So that's my email for anything YKTR related. We're about to have a golf day at the end of the year. I haven't spoke to you about this, but I'm sure you'd probably like to get involved, mate. We're about to start sending that out to a few businesses for sponsorship of holes. So if anyone's interested in getting involved with the golf day at the end of the year, that'll be pretty cool. We're going to have some A-list NRL players that I've been mentioning on my podcast. I've slowly been drip feeding the players. I had Braithen Astor on my podcast this morning, who's agreed to come and play with us, and he's a player manager for footy and also golf. So we might have a few pros there as well. So really looking forward to that at the end of the year. So if anyone wants to get involved in that, that's where you'll definitely reach out to me on my podcast. Not my podcast, sorry, my email, justin@yktr.com.au.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I'm down for that. And I've got to tell you, my golf game is getting better and better and better. I'm playing heaps at the moment.
You message me all the time about it. I know your game's getting good.
Yeah, it's getting much better. So, I'll definitely be down for that. Like, it also, obviously, people can get in touch with you. They contact me. My contact details are going to follow the show. So if they want to get in contact with you, just get in contact with me and I'll pass them on. But look, thanks again. It's always great listening to your story and picking up little new bits every time I speak to you. So thanks for being on the show, Justin.
Thanks for having me, Pete.
Yeah, cheers, buddy.